We're just chit chatting,
Okay.
hanging out. Yeah.
Recording's on.
Okay, with that, let's see. What do I have to do here? Where'd my agenda go? Hold on a second. There it is. Okay, so I would like to call the Housing Segregation Subcommittee meeting to order, and I will read the brief statement that I must read. The Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting, or the Housing Segregation Subcommittee meeting, has now commenced. It is December 15th at 1:06 p.m. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and to protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using the call-in number, to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so that we can track quorum. Also, in order to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. And with that, I will do the roll call. Let's see, Lori Mazurba.
Present.
Vicky Cusino.
Here.
Jay Young, that is me, and I am here. Mike Edmonds is not here today. We have 3 members here out of 4, so we do have quorum. So with that, I will move to item number 2, which is the chair's report. 2 things. One, an update about the ASU equity study, and that is actually done. I got an email this week from Deirdre Pfeiffer, the professor running that class, and I'm not exactly sure. I guess my question is, I guess really to Allison and Netta, how can I share that study? Can I just email it to the members on the subcommittee? I know that we're going to talk about it, although I'm not going to be at the next full commission meeting. So I know we will talk about it at a future commission meeting. So what's the best way to disseminate that? I was a little concerned because, it wasn't up on the website and stuff like that to distribute it beforehand. So
we can do all of those things. We can put it up on the website and send the commissioners the links. We can do that now. We can do that along with the materials for the commission meeting. Yep.
Why don't I do this? Since we haven't sent it out, and obviously we're not going to have a chance to really look over it during the meeting, I will get that to HCD staff and then have y'all get it out to, I guess, really everybody on the commission at this point. And we'll maybe at the next subcommittee meeting, we can keep this on the agenda and review it. That'll give us a good month to look it over and decide what, if anything, we would like to recommend or what. So any thoughts, questions, comments about the equity study update and kind of where we're going with that?
Yeah, Jay, do you have, as we are going to read into the future, do you have any comments about it or any context you'd like to provide for it now so that we have it in mind going into that reading?
I just very briefly, I have not had a chance to look at the full study that the students put together. I think what, kind of working with the students throughout the semester, my kind of big takeaways really early on are that one, I think they looked at three similar cities or cities that the students thought would be good to compare to Tucson to see what those cities have done. And I think that in a lot of ways, Tucson is not very far behind and, is kind of maybe in the middle of the pack in some ways in terms of how it's looking at equity. So I thought that was interesting. I mean, obviously, there are other cities out there that, the students didn't look at that, may provide better examples, but that is what it is. And there was one other thing that I was going to mention, but I am forgetting it at this point. I think that's really about it at this point. Allison, I know that you also were in attendance at some of the meetings with the students. Was there anything from the process this semester that kind of jumped out at you? I mean, not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot.
I mean, I'm mostly really eager to dig into. I feel like we spent a lot of time kind of on defining the problem, and I feel like I haven't had a chance to dig into the city comparisons. That's obviously the thing that I'm the most excited about. Yep.
Yeah. I was just also going to say, I think that there are definitely things that the city of Tucson can take away from what other cities have done, but I also think that each city had its own unique process for how it's gotten to where each city has gotten to, and that's going to be, what the city of Tucson is going to have to do as well. There's not, a one size fits all. I mean, obviously that's probably kind of obvious to say, but I think it bared out in the work the students did. So anyway, I don't have a lot for you, Joe, but that's kind of my initial thoughts. And I think, yeah, Allison, what Allison said, I picked up as well. So yeah, Vicki.
Oh, and just one thing I didn't want to take away from the great work they're doing, but for the record, the one meeting I participated in, I was very irritated that nobody let me into the meeting for 20 minutes. So I missed most of it. I know that they set it up, but if they're going to set up meetings and be in charge of that and have a waiting room, you have to manage that. And then when I did get let into the meeting, because there were all the people in the room, some of them didn't speak up enough, so I couldn't get the captions, and it wasn't accessible or a pleasant experience. I bring it up though, because it's the city working with them. And so I think the city has a responsibility, or this committee, in partnering with such groups and setting up those meetings. It's up to us then to educate others on what is expected when you host such meetings. Just like I did a meeting recently, I don't think Allison was there, but with Liz and some others, about the new website and the vendor. And I'm really pushing, like, don't hire a vendor that doesn't know WCAG and the accessibility guidelines, because now you're doing damage control and spending more money. And so I don't want to get off on a tangent, but it's like, okay, like, you created this problem. Like, if you put these into RFPs, or, make it part of the screening process before you contract with somebody, then you don't end up, doing remediation later. And so I get that they're students, but I think there could have been some better education with the students going into it.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Vicki. And certainly the issue with the waiting room was something that was addressed after you had that experience, and they turned that over to me. And so from that point on, at least I tried to do a better job than they did, because I guess they couldn't eliminate the waiting room feature for their whatever. So
yeah, you can. They must not know how to do it. And and that's based on their settings. You absolutely can eliminate the waiting room.
You just muted.
Sorry, you can eliminate the waiting room through the settings. I hate the waiting room. I don't think it should be used. I think it segregates people. Once in a while, there might be a reason, but having that as a standard, I mean, it really makes it, it creates some accessibility issues, but it also makes the host have to do a lot more work, right? Because you have to be constantly monitoring that for when people arrive and letting them in. Anyway, I always think it should be disabled unless there's a really good reason to have it.
Yeah, and I think you're right too. I mean, the engaging with the students over online like we did was challenging for me as well. It was hard to hear them a lot of the time, and yeah, it's a little bit awkward because obviously to a certain extent I was kind of leading that, but obviously I'm a representative of the commission, and the standards that I, as representative of the commission, probably should have been following weren't clear to me either. So yeah, it's an ongoing problem, and I appreciate you continuing to bring it up, Vicky, because it's yeah, and I mean, just for all of us that have, this is a little bit of an aside, but even for us at Southwest Fair Housing Council, having switched so dramatically to doing stuff online, it's been a challenge to figure out those accessibility pieces, and there are a lot of different layers, and we're just in this new territory where we all have a lot to learn, but I don't think I mean, obviously you bring it up all the time, we're not learning fast enough. So that's an aside from my opinion as well. So
Well, and thanks for that, Jay. I do feel like a broken record, and I'm always the grumpy one talking about problems. And I will say I've reached out to Anne and Liz about the ongoing issues, because I've offered, like, can we do something more proactively as a commission? And honestly, I consider every month resigning because it's just so frustrating and takes so much out of me. But anyway, I just want to emphasize we are supposed to be a commission on equity. And I really feel like accessibility gets left out all the time.
yeah, thank you, Vicky. The second piece of the chair's report is the Mapping Racist Covenants project. It's being led by Professor Jason Jurjevich, I believe is how you say his last name, over at the University of Arizona. And it has gotten started in earnest at this point about a month ago. There was a kickoff event, and I was had the privilege of being on a panel discussing segregation and racist covenants and housing policy, generally speaking, at that event. So the main update I would say is there is a website now. If you just Google Mapping Racial or Racist Covenants Project, University of Arizona, top of the search should be that project. So I know that there are some opportunities for volunteers to participate, because they are actually going to have to go back and look at physical records, though they may be digital records. They're still going to have to go back and look at deeds and other records, real estate records, to actually see which parcels had some sort of racist covenant or continue to have the covenants on them. And they're looking for volunteers to help do that, basically grunt work. So there's that opportunity there. And I would encourage everybody on the commission to at least be aware that this project is going on, because I do think it is really one of the fundamental things that we can really look back historically that helped to really segregate Tucson since back when the redlining maps were created in the 30s. Tucson, I think it was just too small to have redlining maps. So anyway, that's going on. Go ahead, Neto.
Jay, thank you. To the committee, I just forward you an email from Claire Holloway, research assistance on this project, with information and requests for volunteers.
Thank you. Any questions about that project? I guess we could also, as the project goes on, have Jason come and give us some updates along the way. I'm sure he would be willing to do that, because HCD and Southwest Fair Housing Council are both partners on that project. So any questions, thoughts, comments about that project?
I think my question would be, I love knowing the history and how that has influenced how we got here. I want to know if that project is going to have any influence with the city of Tucson. Okay, we're going to look at racist covenants and how they have impacted housing segregation in Tucson. Are there going to be plans to say, oh, yeah, these areas are still segregated and still exist, and what are we going to do about it? Or is this just for posterity, and we're going to look at the history and pat ourselves on the back for knowing it and not do anything? That's my concern, is the action that's related to it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Joe. And I think that our subcommittee can be a conduit for the project and sharing information with the full commission. And I would definitely like to leave that on our agenda going forward, just so we kind of have it as a placeholder. Because yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that, at least looking at the redlining maps in other communities, if you overlay those maps today with the current housing situation, you still find that those areas are underserved and very highly racially segregated. And I would be willing to bet anybody on this call that that's going to be the case with the racist covenants as well, that those areas are still highly segregated. So certainly open to ideas about how we as a commission, particularly as a subcommittee, particularly as that project matures, how we can make sure that at least it's front and center with the city, and that they know what's going on and to take action. So Joe, if I could ask you to kind of keep us honest, if you would, throughout the project, and keep us reminded of that and taking action. And I'll certainly do that as well, but I really love that idea.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to Jay's comments that yeah, I mean, I think we know what some of the outcome is going to be in terms of being able to overlay those maps with current opportunity areas, and right, so that's why HCD's kind of already been doing some of that opportunity mapping. I think it's still really helpful to know and articulate the history there. And I mean, it sounded like, kind of one of the takeaways that Jay's group was hoping to do is really some rectifying of those racist covenants, right? And that's a little bit, it's a little bit separate from city policy, but I think again, on the understanding the impact of segregation now on and what that means for city moving forward will be helpful. And just similar to what Jay said, definitely looking to this commission and this subcommittee on what those what the policy recommendations then are and should be, and partnering with you guys on that. So appreciate you guys' input, and again, keeping everybody honest.
Any more discussion about the Mapping Racist Covenants project? Hearing none, let's move on to agenda item number 3, which is a discussion of issues related to gentrification and displacement, and a summary of city actions. And I believe, Allison, you are going to talk to us about that. So take it away.
I have to unmute myself and then figure out how to do a presentation. Bear with me one second. I'm going to share my screen. So yeah, I kind of took your direction from the last meeting, and I know it's been a couple months. So I'll just say that I started with kind of a brief overview just of where we've been in the last few years. And so it's a very short presentation. And I'm hoping that just sort of starts the conversation, and you, this committee can ask for kind of future iterations of information and direction for kind of where you want to go with this conversation. So, and I also want to give the caveat that this is Allison's kind of history lesson. Kind of, I don't want to take any credit for this is the absolute definitive city approach to gentrification and displacement by any means. So just give me that grace there, if you will. Let me share my screen. Okay. I'm gonna not do the slideshow if that's okay, because I feel like that messes with that messes my view of people. Can everyone see this okay? Okay. So actually what I did is just created a timeline of the past few years, and I'll walk through it a bit. But we'll start with saying, right, that conversation about gentrification and displacement did not start happening a few years ago. They have always kind of been in conversation, but I'm starting my timeline around 2019 when concerns really started coming to the forefront in terms of city mayor and council's policy conversations. So that's kind of where I'm starting the timeline, kind of as housing prices began to rise and these concerns started being brought to mayor and council meetings. So part of that, I will say, right, we've included language about counseling and education to gentrifying neighborhoods in previous sort of City of Tucson consolidated plans, annual action plans. Like it's for many years now has been kind of a piece of the city's and HCD's funding mechanism. But moving forward to 2019, right, that conversation definitely started rising to the forefront with groups like what eventually became the Barrio Neighborhood Coalition. There was a mayoral race and ward race at the time too. And so that was definitely a piece of those kind of election conversations as well. And so 2019 is kind of when this gentrification and displacement really got onto like the mayor and council agenda. And we started having conversations about an anti-displacement task force, how, what do we want to do as a city? Started sending some city staff to cities like Austin to learn from them what they've been doing. And so that I kind of jump-started a couple, starting to talk about gentrification and displacement in city plans and policies. And so one of those was we partnered with U of A and a CAPLA class did as a capstone a displacement study. And I can provide links to all of these things if it would be helpful. Kind of, again, just talking through. Again, a little bit more stronger language about concerns about changing neighborhoods were identified in the cities and Pima County's consolidated plan and analysis of impediments to their housing, right? There was a whole engagement process through that, and that was really one of the themes that came up. And so that those plans included recommendations and funding ideas for gentrification and displacement. So right, as you all know, the conversations about an anti-displacement task force resulted in the establishment of the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development, and having that be one of the charges of this group is, providing expertise and recommendations to the city around these policies. So that was established July 2020, and we had our first CEHD meeting February 2021. And again, you all know the history of kind of where we've been the last almost 2 years, just kind of getting ourselves established, establishing the subcommittee, advising on things like the HAST and PCHIP and things like that. So also February 2021, when the Gary Pivo GPLET study came out, through 2020 and 2021, right, part of a lot of these conversations were, what do we know? What does the data actually tell us about what's happening in neighborhoods? And so that sparked the housing market study that we worked really closely with the U of A's MAP dashboard Eller school on. And so that was finalized in May 2021. And findings from those were incorporated into things like the DIP and the HAST, highlighting concerns and policy recommendations there. Some related policy changes have happened in 2021 around the Sunshine Mile overlay, providing density bonuses are where we know we're kind of planning for an increase in investment for affordable housing. And then, right, the ADU text amendment was adopted in December 2021. And then again, as you know, kind of 2022 has all been HASP implementation and really focusing on our kind of affordable housing and development efforts. So going to the next slide, I just wanted to highlight a few of those policy initiatives have looked like, right, really thinking of the ability for HCD to make a difference in the gentrification and displacement realm, right? Our role kind of being really on that affordability piece, that housing development piece. And so a few of those initiatives have included, and these are all in HASP and kind of other plans, for instance, developing infill lots in neighborhoods with gentrification concerns. So we have projects ongoing in Barrio Anita, Menlo Park, Dunbar Spring on city-owned lots there. The Thrive in the 05 effort, you know, really kind of looking comprehensively at a neighborhood and thinking that if we are, as a community, investing a lot of money in a community, that we really want to focus on front-loading affordable housing development there. I think if that's my phone. It's not my phone. Can you hear the background music? A little bit, okay. Focusing on cultural preservation, right, with the folks who live there, making sure that we're building a community that works for the residents that are currently there and are bringing in the investments that they want to see. Kind of related to both of those things, right, we now have funding from allocated from Mayor and Council for some housing acquisition and affordable housing in those revitalization areas. Like I mentioned on the timeline slide, that has included text amendments to advance affordable housing, in particularly in areas where, you know, we are seeing or will see investment, like the Sunshine Mile, like the IID in the downtown area, and the ability to right, create ADUs and more, you know, investment in kind of these owner-occupied homes. So and then using the funding mechanisms that CD has, for instance, the PCHIP Human Services Funds have funded things like the Pima County Community Land Trust Gentrification and Anti-Displacement Workshop. And then last but not least, right, forming the commission and support commission and really hoping that as a community we can advance future efforts. So that's my very brief kind of overview, and happy to answer questions or listen to the discussion of yeah, where you guys want to go.
Thanks, Allison. Questions, comments?
Oh, I have comments.
Take it away, Joe.
Yeah, starting kind of at the beginning of that timeline slide. Yeah, 2019 was when a lot of people started getting loud and really angry about displacement and gentrification. And the city was reactive. They were on the back foot. They weren't in front of it. And it was just a bunch of people who started hearing from their friends and neighbors multiple times a month that somebody was looking for housing, somebody was getting evicted, evictions that aren't called evictions because somebody raise the rent and they're having to find new places to live. I post on Facebook this week from a city council aide whose rent's going up $300 a month and can't afford to live in Tucson anymore. Works at the city council. And it's still 3 years later, you can hear it infuriating. And the original recommendation was for a task force, yeah. You know, the task force probably would have had to do some tasks. And instead we got a commission, which has had a lot of discussion and has not, I mean, in terms of evictions, displacement, and gentrification, this task force or this commission is on a road to nowhere. And I think, Jay, you're doing a great job of bringing these things up. I think in Housing First, we started to turn a corner, and it's really unfortunate that Liz Wilson has to leave us as we're doing that. But so much of the commission's being driven by, I think, the people who are from the Affordable Housing Subcommittee who aren't interested in what we're talking about and keeping people in housing. And they sure as hell want to get 2 more LIHTC projects a year. They will spend years on it. But as far as keeping people in housing, there isn't discussion about it. It hasn't been a priority. And it's really, again, it's beyond disappointing. I know, we sat down at Barrio Neighborhood Coalition with a couple of people who went to San Antonio and Austin. And my thought was that, all right, we're going to send these people to San Antonio and Austin, and we're going to see what displacement gentrification is doing here, how they got here, and what's failing there. And are the cities doing anything? Are the nonprofits doing anything? And I feel like it's been used by the city to say, oh yeah, these places are doing a lot of development. They're really thriving. They're absolute disappointments when it comes to the issues that we need to be looking at there, which are, again, evictions and gentrification and displacement. So that's part of that disappointment. When I see on a slide planning for increase in investment, I hear planned gentrification. That's what I hear. You throw ADUs in there. There wasn't, any requirement for affordability, and I get that. There wasn't any requirement that people have to live in the ADUs, so they can just, all be investment properties. I don't see that helping with affordability, and I think that's been a big talking point. And I think it's been really, the pushback on that has been pretty accurate. Has been and it's been strong, not just in Tucson, but all over. You look at how the push for ADUs went in California. Like, you look at something like the Casita Coalition, right? Big ADU organization pushing for those. And like one of the board members is the vice president of Greystar. Like, and Greystar is perfectly fine taking entire floors of apartment buildings and renting them out as short-term rentals. Like, they'll build units and they're not housing units. And that's just a giant concern, I think, for a lot of us. And the other thing I want to say about, I'm on a rant, I get it. The other thing I want to say about the city is, every couple of years we see some of these overlays and districts come up for review. And it seems like the sunset clauses are just in there so that the city can consider expanding them, not that they consider putting any meaningful limitations or any rules on them to actually help people who aren't housing developers. When you look at 70% of renters in Tucson being housing cost burdened, and you look at the IID and CBD areas saying, yeah, there's 1,120 new residential units being built there, and 183 of them are affordable. What is that, 16%? When 70% of your renters are housing cost burden, it's drastically insufficient. And it's a giant disappointment. So the IID and all these things come up. You had Gary Pivo's study on there, and we ignore what Gary Pivo found, which was, to quote, gentrification as indicated by gains in the number of households earning more than $50,000 per year occurred in 74% of the block groups in and around the central business district, which is almost exactly the IID too. In Census Tract 10, including parts of Barrio Viejo and Santa Rosa, Hispanics fell from 61 to 42%, while non-Hispanic whites grew from 26 to 40%. I'm going to leave out we brought these before the Planning Commission a few weeks ago. I'm going to leave out a bunch of stuff here. But the last quote I'll give you is, if long-term residents can no longer identify with their neighborhood, they lose attachment to place and leave, hastening conversion to homogeneous enclaves instead of integrated mixed income neighborhoods. This means just as it is important to preserve affordable housing to prevent residential displacement, maintaining political equity and power balances between longstanding and new residents in transitioning neighborhoods might be important to ensuring that long-term residents benefit and thrive as neighborhoods revitalize around them. That's all I'm going to say about it, because we keep perpetuating the same policies, even when we commission a study and there's stark reminders how those policies are failures in preventing the kind of displacement gentrification and increasing the equity that we want to see. And I'm beside myself on a regular basis about it. And I'm sorry that the people in this meeting who I really like are the ones to bear the brunt of that anger. But this is a discussion about those failures, and I feel it's important to bring them up. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Anybody else?
I just really want to thank you, Joe, for saying a lot of things that that I think as well. And I struggle sometimes being on the commission with and working in this community as someone who works towards ending homelessness in different capacities, like what the consequences of saying the things are. And I think, you know, your point about the commission, as a member who's been here from the beginning, we've talked about this, I'm frustrated as well. And so I just appreciate your complete frankness and the fact that you show up each and every meeting and that you say the things that need to be said, because it's the only way we're going to start to make change. So I just really want to thank you for your honesty, and I echo just about every single one of your points.
Vicky, do you have any comments? Not that you have to, but want to give you the shot.
No, just I just clap my hands because I agree. I just would have reiterated what basically Lori said. So,
Cool.
and thank you, Joe.
Yeah, and I appreciate the comments as well, Joe, and share a lot of your frustration. And I feel like, you know, one of the ways that we meaning the people that live in Tucson, the way that we get away with not doing anything is that we create commissions and we put people who might actually do something about stuff on the commissions. And then what it takes is 2 years to figure out what we're actually doing as a commission. And then we start. So, I mean, you know, it's just a way to create public participation and slow things down. So, you know, on the one hand, I'm glad that we exist as a commission because we need to have the conversation. But at the same time, like you said, Joe, the study, the PIVO study, just as one example, came out years ago. What do you need the commission to do anything with PIVO's study for? I mean, the city can do what it wants. So, what else do I want to say about that? I mean, I guess what I would throw out to the subcommittee members here is, what do we want to do about it? I mean, I do think that we have the power as a subcommittee to move the ball forward in some way. And I think this goes back to, for me, the same issues of why I think it's so important to do an equity study. I mean, call it an equity study, call it a gentrification study, call it a housing stability study, whatever, what have you. But, again, we're not really measuring from year to year changes over time, right? So it's like, what is the city actually doing about it? And that's why I wanted to bring it up. And how is it being measured over time? If it's been talked about and identified and studies have been done, what are the policies that are in place to do something about it, and how are they having an impact? And I feel like, that's the thing for me that just continues to be something that this commission is unable to get its head around, and that the city, frankly, is unable to get us in any meaningful way to analyze a lot of these issues that we bring up. So I think for me, it goes back to, you've got to be measuring this stuff, and the policies that are being put in place have to be measured so that you know from one year to the next, are things getting better? Are things getting worse? Are they staying the same? And, that just doesn't happen. And I feel like it's Arizona. You hear this from the state level. I feel like you hear this generally speaking from the local level as well, because it's easy. And we need more housing, and we just need to build more housing. However that happens, it's easy to conceptualize and people just understand that. But all of these other pieces of the puzzle, who the housing's built for, where it's built, access to opportunity, segregation, is just, it's complicated, and it slows things down oftentimes in a way that I feel like things need to be slowed down. But it just gives us an out to be like, well, yes, we all know we need to build more housing, so let's do that. So anyway, I see you came off mute, Joe. So
Yeah. And part of, when we talk about that timeline, part of that was the map dashboard, right? And you all have probably heard me complain about it, that when we looked at the map analysis, the map dashboard gap analysis, one of the central points to me was that, is Vicky still here, or did we lose Corin?
no, I think she's still here.
Okay, cool. One of the points was, it said explicitly, Tucson has enough housing units and we don't have enough affordable housing. There are two things that are really easy to say, and that is, it's complicated and we need more housing. But if you don't say what kind of housing we need, if we don't specify that this is an affordable housing and housing affordability crisis rather than a housing crisis, it's super easy to just say, okay, we're gonna get more built. But if we don't get people who need housing into the units that get built, they're no damn good. And people say, well, it'll all help. Okay, unless you're specifying mixed incomes, unless you're specifying a subsidy and making sure that subsidy has a revenue source, unless you're doing something, like I said, 16% of the units in a certain area being affordable ain't gonna cut it at some point. And if you open up and say, great, we're gonna incentivize development, and you get a market rate project, I don't have anything necessarily against the market rate project, but you hear developers say, we're looking for spots to do infill development all the time. Great, that's one that's lost for affordable housing, because you can't develop an affordable housing project now. There's the Rendezvous or the Flynn or Bautista or the Monier or the Benedictine. There's no affordable units in any of those. So if you want to promote filtering, okay, something that's coming in at 150% of AMI and is getting closer to that at 2 to 2.2% a year, figure out that timeline of when it's going to be affordable. It's not soon. And that's if they don't do something like the Cadence and redevelop it 8 or 9 years and bring it back to the top of the market. So it is easy to say, build more. We need more housing. And then we've got a whole state legislature housing supply study committee that's banging that point home. And we need to go further, and we need to be critical about that policy and make sure that we're saying that we need units that are affordable to people who need housing and people who are paying too much for housing, who are in that housing cost burden area. And I know it's not just renters, we people who are homeowners who are housing cost burdened. It's a much lower percentage, and you do end up with some housing cost certainty when you are a homeowner. Property taxes kind of aside. And I think we don't talk enough about, I just gave you 15 minutes of problems, but I don't think we look at solutions enough. And I think the solutions are, in a large manner, getting our housing less reliant on entities that are dedicated to extracting the maximum profit out of housing, and getting it into the hands of anyone or any organization that is committed to keeping people in housing rather than extracting the maximum profit from it. That's it. And that's a community control. You can call it community controlled housing, call it social housing, I don't care what you call it. We're talking about, we're talking about a city where we've seen massive underinvestment in public housing. We've seen growth in our city since Faircloth in 1999. We've seen a 20% reduction in the amount of public housing we've had over that period. Nobody seems to want to talk about. I think Piclet's great. I think land trusts are a terrific idea, and we need more of that. And I think the other community control measure can be co-ops. I know there are a few of them in Tucson, but throwing money into workshops about ADUs and throwing money into I don't know what happens in an anti-displacement gentrification workshop. Are there any workshops about how to form a co-op? Are there do we have anything to advance things like tenant right to purchase? Do we have and I'm treading on the ground that Housing First covered recently, I think, in some of their tenant protection plans. But I think those are the things that has to be talked about. And I think it's okay to talk about them here because keeping people housed is an anti-segregation measure, make sure people who are in their neighborhoods don't have to move and aren't displaced means that you're preventing some ongoing segregation. And that's topical here. Keeping people housed means that fewer people need a Housing First program. It's topical to that. And of course, the statistic that correlates most with homelessness is housing affordability, is actually the price of housing and who can afford it. So this fits into every darn subcommittee we have. And it's taken us 22 months to get to have substantive conversations about it. So if I can, give a couple things that I think should move forward, getting another 100 units of LIHTC a year is transformative for the families that get into the LIHTC. It's necessary and it's not sufficient. And I hope the next steps are other programs that we can, Milagros on Oracle was, I think, is a really good example of something that we need more of. That the city getting involved in development. And I know some of the affordable housing developers hate it. They hate the competition and say, well, that's not right. You know what? It's more people who are going to get housing, man. And that's what we got to be here for. That getting the people into housing, keeping them in housing, and all that. If we're not focused on that, the commission's lost.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And I think, one of the things that I also like to oversimplify, so I'm going to do it a little bit here, but I do feel like, we have skewed so far as a community and a society towards the private market. We don't even understand and have a concept that essentially all of housing is controlled by the private market, even LIHTC, it's a drop in the bucket. And so, this is what we get when the private market runs everything. You get an explosion in homelessness, you get lack of affordability. I mean, you just need 5 minutes with Jim Tophel to hear about how difficult it is for any builder to build anything that any, poor person can live in. The private market is unable to do it. And that's why you have this huge gap. So I know there are a lot of nuances there, but that's kind of, I feel like, the situation we're living in. I think a couple of other things I want to put on the table. We had a lot of conversation at our last meeting about a housing bond. I think that that's building momentum. I think that that's good. But again, it's like, what does a housing bond look like? What are we going to be doing with it? What's the role of this commission? How is that being formed? I think the presentation from Flagstaff was instructive in terms of how long it took them to get through the process, and it didn't happen the first time, and public participation, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that needs to be on our radar. And what I would propose that we, as a subcommittee, take to the full commission, maybe we don't do it at the next meeting, maybe we talk about it again, but basically put forth the idea of a task force that is actually looking at these issues: gentrification, displacement, eviction. I'd throw housing stability in there as well. And I think it goes into item number 5, but I think that we need to push this commission, whether it's a task force or something else, to actually come up with solutions that address not just the housing supply, which the other subcommittee has done and it is necessary, but I think we as a subcommittee need to push for a task force or something that is action oriented, that really puts some things on the table for the city to implement to address these issues we're talking about. So I guess I would ask for my commission members, and I'll get to you in a sec, Joe. I see you came off mute, but for my fellow subcommittee members, what do you guys think about putting something on the table? Maybe we can just, I can address it at our summary for the next full commission meeting, but actually thinking about having a more action-oriented group be formed, whether it's a task force or something like that. Lori and Vicky, what do you guys think about taking that forward, or do you have other ideas about kind of where to go from here? I'm certainly open.
Do you mean our current group, or do you mean asking for that from the commission as like an additional group?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I don't know if I don't think it should be us. I mean, that's just, we don't have the capacity to do it. I mean, we certainly could be, part of that. And I don't even know that it's necessarily the commission, but so I don't really have that very well thought out, but some sort of body that is, actually looking at these issues and putting solutions on the table, to Joe's point about, we kind of know this is going on, but what are the solutions that are being proposed, and why are solutions not being, why are there more policy solutions that are not being put forward? So I don't know. I guess that's a long-winded answer of saying I don't know. I don't know exactly.
So, I have a lot of thoughts about that. We had brought up in a while ago how we were sort of frustrated with the pace at which the commission was moving, and that, nothing changed there. And so I'm okay with, being part of a different group, but if we don't have the buy-in of the city and the county, Joe, you're probably, as a community organizer, ready to poke me in the eyeball, but I feel I'm reticent to ask for people's time when we keep asking, for more action from the commission, and we still got lots of presentations, and we haven't, we spent so much time on electric vehicle thing that was already passed and we had no input on, and so I guess I get frustrated that our attention is not in the right places, and how do we best do that? And if forming something else is how we do that, then I'm all for it. But I guess, I'm in this place where it's like, if I'm going to be a part of something, we better have some action. I mean, really, 2 years in.
Let me say that I would never try to poke any of you in the eye because you're all wearing glasses. No, because I value all of your time. HCD, Jay, Lori, Vicky. I love that you're on this and have the commitment to keep showing up and doing this, and I love that. So I don't want to poo-poo anybody's commitment or ideas or any of it on this. My concern is that there's a recommended task force. Instead, you get a commission that then recommends a task force that can have a task force, and they can recommend a commission on displacement. And
it's like a Monty Python sketch, really.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a circle. And when do we get actual people from the community to say this is what we need, and the city goes, great, let's work on that. Sorry to cut you off, Vicky.
Go ahead, Vicky.
So I probably don't have anything new to add. I mean, Lori kind of got at this and so did Joe, but I mean, here we are again talking about yet another related issue where it comes to how do we track progress? And I mean, this has been an ongoing frustration. I do want to say, you know, I do my share of venting or complaining or asking the city to do things. I want to say though, on this particular thing about tracking progress and being more outcomes focused, there are some things that have happened offline where I feel like there is support for doing that from the city staff that support this commission. And this might be an unpopular opinion, where I think it gets stalled is with leadership of this commission. And that's where I think accessibility issues get stalled. And I've thought that for a long time. I know now I'm publicly saying it. That's the other reason why I'm like, is this commission even worthwhile? We talk about the same things all the time, or, you know, talk about great ideas and then we move on and we do a lot of talking. And then I don't know what happens with that, you know, and I mean, you know, from those of you who do community organizing, that is not the way to keep people engaged or to actually make any progress. I desperately want like a logic model and to follow it, and to, you know, if we're having a discussion, tie it into the actual goals and outcomes. I don't know, maybe that's not how commissions work, but I know this isn't helping. I don't know the solution, but it's like, sure, we can form another task force or committee, but what does that do? You know?
So point well taken, Vicky and Lori, about, you know, the idea of forming another task force, et cetera. I guess really what I'm trying to put out there is, we talk about the lack of action. How do we get more action? I mean, that ultimately is what I'm asking about, and whether, if it's not a task force, like how do we get there? I guess that's really kind of what I'm asking. You know what I mean? If we're all kind of frustrated by how we're getting bogged down, the conversation, we're having a lot of conversations that don't seem to be, you know, linking to the things we want them to link to and linking to action. Like, what, at the very least, you know, the three of us commission members on the call right now, I mean, what can we do about it? Because I'm stumped like you guys are. So what do we do from here to address the things we're frustrated? Go ahead, Joe.
I think it's a great question. I'll tell you something that after attending like 50 of these meetings, I'm loath to admit, but I had a community member and an activist when this commission started tell me that the city's never going to make a commission unless they can control who's on it and control who runs it. And the commissions are made to make sure nothing happens. And when you talk about this is the perfect way to make sure people get disengaged from the issue, that's not wrong. And I hate admitting that that guy might have been right when he told me that. So yeah, we looked at, when the commission was forming, how people were getting picked, and it was submit your resume from the housing industry. And that's gotten us some terrific people. Jay, Lori, Vicky, you know, Liz and Mindy and a few other people have gotten us some real great people who are real advocates, and I appreciate that. But there aren't really community members that have that resume and could have gotten on the CHD. I didn't apply for this to be on the CHD because, like, I have a resume. My resume is as an IT guy. My resume is working for internet companies and software makers and stuff like that. My resume doesn't look like anything to be on the CEHD. And I think you can say that for all kinds of housing organizers in Tucson. You know, if you're an activist and an advocate, for housing equity, you don't qualify for being on the Commission for Equitable Housing and Development. And there are some exceptions. Again, those you do it professionally, and I'm looking at a bunch of you right now. But I don't know how to turn that around, Jay. And it's going to frustrate and stymie us until we can say, yeah, this is the way to do it. But I don't know what it is. And this is, I've engaged with the planning committee and the mayor and council for years, but I don't know of a better way to do it. And I haven't been in this situation where I have a lot of input into a commission before, so I don't know what it is, but I know that there are people that have been working on this for decades and we're still here. That's frustrating.
Yeah, go ahead, Vicky.
Yeah, well, and Joe, thanks for saying that, because I have heard that too, like just about, the role of commissions. And I said from the beginning, I don't appreciate serving as window dressing. And I feel like that's what we are. I'm going to say it again. And Lori brought up that, the one thing that we spent a lot of time discussing and then, we passed was about, the issue about electric vehicles. That was not something I saw as a priority that I heard the commission feel was a priority, but it became prioritized because the mayor talked to Jim. I'll be honest, I resent that. I resent that was a huge focus, and it was very political and presented as, hey, this is a way we can help the mayor. I don't serve on this commission to just please the mayor. I don't feel like that's what my role is. Maybe it is. Maybe that is what these commissions are for. And if it is, honestly, I'd rather somebody just tell me that up front. Seriously, because then, like, let's just be honest, and so if you just want yes people to support what the mayor wants, hey, we can recommend people, but it's not me. and I'm really, I feel like this takes a lot of my time, and I don't really, well, me personally, because the disability issues are involved, I feel like all I do is complain, and we're not making progress on other issues as well. So I'm sorry, we're just like kind of back to rehashing things, but to answer, your question about should we form another committee or task force, I guess I would say no, just because I don't want them to go through what we're going through.
Well, so let me put it another way. I guess one of the things hearing everybody talk is, something that would have a lot of impact is if we all resigned. So, that's a thing. I'm not advocating for that, but what I do think that we could do, particularly since it's the end of the year, we're getting ready to start 2023, is maybe what we can do at our next subcommittee meeting is we can spend the majority of the meeting talking about what a successful 2023 looks like for our subcommittee and then for the full commission, and work towards that. And if by the end of 2023 we feel like we're still here, then maybe we do all think about resigning. I know that that's kind of a big thing to do, but like Vicky, from what you're saying, you're like it wouldn't be that much, it wouldn't be that big a deal to you. And I know Lori, I know you're frustrated as well. So anyway.
Well, and I am an activist. So hey, if people want to make more of a bold move to make a point and do some type of action, I am all for that. With the commission, I feel like I'm often in the minority, but yeah, that would be a statement. I appreciate what you're saying, Jay, is maybe we try again with something more formal as commission members, but yeah, I am there, but me resigning myself means absolutely nothing. And I think probably a couple of people would be like, phew, thank goodness. Like, let's do our little happy dance because she's a pain in the ass.
I think it would need to be, if we were going to do it and it was going to have impact, it would need to be a group of us that did it and, you know, put together a letter and said, this is why we're resigning and X, Y, and Z. But I mean, I'm not there yet. I do think that I guess my counterpoint would be, while I share the frustrations that you guys all do, I do think that if we are able to put our heads together, figure out what some success looks like, I do think that we actually could move the needle with mayor and council. So while I think it's good for us to vent and, you know, put our issues out on the table, I do think that I do still have some belief that there is a way for us to move the needle, because people have told me offline over and over again, you know, mayor and council does care about what you guys are doing. So, you know, if we feel like we're being moved in directions we don't want to be moved in as a commission, that's kind of on us. And, you know, I think we can do something about that. So, I mean, maybe, okay, so in the interest of time, it's about getting towards 2:15. We've got about an hour and a half altogether. So I'm happy to keep having the discussion, but I want to put out there maybe what we do. So we've got a couple of things for our next meeting, our next subcommittee meeting. The ASU equity study will go out. I think that's some movement in the right direction. The Mapping Racist Covenants project, that's a move in the right direction. And I think that what I would propose that we spend a lot of time on is, you know, part B of this conversation of like, okay, if we're going to continue to meet as the Housing Segregation Subcommittee, why don't we take our next meeting to really kind of outline what success looks like for us in 2023, and stick to that as well, because I certainly, as the chair of the subcommittee, haven't been super on top of kind of drawing a thread and actually kind of moving us in that direction. It's been kind of more amorphous, just kind of going where we tend to go, but we can certainly be a lot more intentional. And that's what I would propose for our next meeting, that we, you know, maybe take an hour and talk about what success looks like. Does that seem like going in the right direction? Something good for next meeting? Okay. If you guys are okay with it, I would like to move to, I guess it's number 4. We still have number 4 to get to. And I put this on the agenda, and I think it is very much related to what we've been talking about. And I just want to have it be another piece of this overall discussion, at least what we do in our subcommittee. And the reason I put this on the agenda is because, you know, at Southwest Fair Housing Council, you know, from year to year, we get 800 calls, give or take, from people in the community with housing issues, and 95% of them do not have a fair housing issue. They do not, it's not fair housing related. It doesn't have to do with discrimination, but it has to do with some other landlord tenant issue, you know, repairs not being done, eviction issues, all the things that we know that renters in particular deal with. And one of my huge frustrations is that while we can obviously help people with fair housing issues, there's very little we can do to help people that have landlord tenant issues. And it turns out there's not much help for those people out in the community either. And it's a huge hole. I mean, I think one of the things that could be done, and I think this should be a city and county joint effort, is that they have landlord tenant counselors or something to that effect, that's helping people that are having these issues to navigate their situations. Because people often, our experience at Southwest Fair Housing Council is people often make their situations worse because, one, they don't know what the laws are, they don't know what their rights are, they don't know where to turn, there's not help in the community. So I wanted to put that on our agenda to discuss as well. As really about housing stability. And I think that it's, along with all the other issues we're talking about, to me, it's about housing stability. And again, you know, kind of to Joe's point, we could build 1 million new housing units, but if people aren't stable and able to stay in those units and build lives, then what difference does it make? I mean, so again, an oversimplification, but that's kind of my point. So I wanted to bring that up as an item for discussion. and to kind of put it on our radar. So I don't know if there's any thoughts about how we address that, or if that's kind of, again, what we're kind of moving forward in 2023. But any thoughts about just housing stability and resources and support for renters primarily in Tucson?
I think you have made a great suggestion, Jay. You all know I am on the right to counsel train. I think a city and county joint effort would be outstanding and expand, it probably looks like an expansion of the emergency eviction legal services team at the county. Again, to a joint effort and make it right to counsel, and maybe expand that to investigation of landlord tenant issues and deal with that. And I've said in other meetings, I think right to counsel isn't just a good equity program where you put tenants on a legal footing that's better with regards to that landlord tenant relationship, but it's also for the to me, it's an ethical and moral issue. But if you want to look at it strictly from a pragmatic financial sense, it's also a policy that ends up saving municipalities, cities, counties, and states a bunch of money. And right now, the county's paying for it. So I feel like city and state kind of get to freeload off of that a little bit. So I think that's the reasoning and justification for making that a joint program. Not only does it impact city and county users, it also impacts funding and resources that are used by the city and state. Keeping people housed is a good financial program for all of us.
And to go along with that, I just think there's no unified effort, right? So, from 1 month to the next, 1 year to the next, you don't know what programs are available. And there's not a central dispatch in a sense that someone could call if they've got, their stove has not been repaired for 2 months versus, they're a little bit behind on rent versus, their landlord is doing something illegal. These are all different situations, but someone in that situation is going to be looking in the community for some sort of solution. And there's not a place that they can call, and people just get the runaround all the time. And, we're guilty of that because, we just do the best we can, but there's no central hub for people to go to. And I think it's a huge problem. And yeah, I mean, the amount of money that the city and county and state could save by just helping people navigate the rights that they do have as tenants would be dramatic. So I just want to put that on our list going forward as kind of like, I think it fits nicely with gentrification, displacement, eviction, and really, again, overall housing stability and how we're helping to keep people stably housed. So I don't know if there's any more thoughts or discussion about that, but I just wanted to put that on our radar as something that we're kind of putting in our pot going forward.
Jay, do you want to get more kind of flesh out the details and in a coming month make a recommendation to the general CEHD about what that office could look like?
I do. And, I want that to be, yes, I think some sort of recommendation. But again, to me, it goes back to the reason that I, suggested a task force, which I understand the pushback on, but it's like, we as this small group, we can't do this. I mean, we don't have staff, we don't have time. We've got day jobs. We're lucky if we meet once a month for an hour and a half. So we've got to be figuring out what resources are available, what other entities have the capacity to do this work and move it forward. I just feel like our ability, what we can do is tell people what to do and ask that things get done on our behalf. So I don't have the answers for it, but I think that we need to start asking people to give us the answers that we need. So yes, I would like to do that, Joe, and to probably, but I don't know that we're quite there yet. And same with, like what we're talking about, what we want to see done in 2023, be it for our subcommittee or as the commission as a whole. So.
Well, I'm with you. If y'all get 800 calls a year on that, I think you can consider yourself an expert on what's needed in that
Yeah.
area.
I certainly know that there's a need. How to fix it, I don't know, but I certainly know that the need is there. So yeah, point taken for sure. Again, in the interest of time, any more discussion on that before we move on to number 5? Number 5, HAST implementation updates and discussion. Allison?
Yeah, I'd kind of just leave this on here. If there are questions that the commissioners have, I mean, right, the biggest thing for this group, right, we have an adopted source of income protection ordinance, and our city attorney has filed a response to Speaker Toma's complaint against the ordinance. So that is what has happened on that since we last met.
I will also say that I am in close discussion with the enforcement of the source of income protection. It's part of the overall city's, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't know specifically the details, but it does fall under what we do at Southwest Fair Housing Council in terms of, helping to enforce that. So there's still some details being worked out, but it is definitely moving forward. So fingers crossed that it doesn't get struck down, whatever that might look like. But yeah, thanks for that update, Allison. Any thoughts or questions before we move on to the next agenda item?
Real quick, if you're going to have HAST updates, you know what I want to hear about. It's repositioning public housing. We just had a conversation where one of the points was, you can track the movement in the housing market back to like the late 60s and early 70s, Nixon freezing public HUD funds and public housing funds, and the fight with Romney and Midstead, and moving it from there to us having fewer public housing units and a massive underfunding of public housing. So anything with public housing that we're thinking about changing is going to be, I think, a big concern for. It's going to be a big concern for me, and I think it should be a bigger concern to more people. So repositioning is such an amorphous term that I'm really worried about it, and I will continue to be worried about it, and I will continue to ask y'all about it when you're talking about the HASC plan, because I worry, and I'm not going to assume anything, but I have concerns. Thank you.
Yep, and I hear you, and the same update is that those plans, even just coming up with a plan, has been on hold, as we have recently hired for that position that was in charge of that. Not necessarily anything other than that. So I hope, but yeah, is on my radar in terms of when there is a better update coming probably to the full commission with it.
I think we just lost quorum. Is Lori still here? I don't see her on my screen anymore. See if she gets back on.
While we're waiting, thank you, Allison. I don't mean to ever really. I feel like sometimes I'm berating you or Ernesto or Liz Morales or Sarah Megason. I know that you had lost staff that was working on that, and have rehired and want to get that moving again. I think it's important for people to know what's going on there, and I think it's extra important for the commission to know what's going on there. So I'm doing that not because I think anybody in particular at HCD has fallen down on the job. I just want to keep that at the top of a lot of people's minds and be conscientious about it. Because I mean, I've heard it's rad stuff, and just hearing about rad from like people who work with the NYCHA and other places, I have rad can be done a few different ways, and there's a lot of concerns.
And I feel like we do need to stop stop discussing things if we don't have quorum. Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, I just got, I think we all might have gotten an email from Lori that she had to log off, but couldn't put it into chat. So we have lost quorum. I do think we made it through the vast majority of the meaty things we wanted to talk about today. So with that, I will end our subcommittee meeting. Is there anything else I need to do since we lost quorum, Allison?
Can I just ask a quick question? Just so we can't even have discussions without quorum, because most things you need quorum to vote. But so you're saying with committee meetings, you can't even discuss without quorum. Is that correct?
Yep, it's no longer a meeting.
I'm not on the commission, so that's why I kept talking and feel a need to violate all the rules. The other thing I was going to say eventually was, at the top of the meeting, you say you're not going to take votes via chat and all that. As long as you turn chat off, you probably don't need that part.
True. Also, I was wondering, like, how long are we going to be instituting those rules based on COVID? I wonder when that's going to end, and are we then no longer going to be meeting virtually? Because that would, as much as I like meeting in person, it makes it a lot easier to meet when we can do it virtually. So anyway, I'm not asking for an answer.
I'll
just
do it so
wondering.
Vicky doesn't have to. That's an accessibility issue for people who are medically complex. That's an accessibility issue for a lot of different reasons. And I'm going to push back on that at every opportunity. If y'all want to get rid of me, the way to do it is to go to live meetings in person, and you'll probably get a letter from me every 2 months, but you'll never see my face again.
All right,
All right,
everybody. Since we lost quorum, want to thank everybody today for great discussion. Wish you all a happy holidays, and see you all in 2023.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Thank you. Y'all take care.
Bye.